Hi everyone, and welcome to today's video where we're going to be discussing living expenses while you're studying abroad. Now, one of the most overlooked aspects of studying abroad is the living expenses. We keep thinking about the tuition fees and what we're going to have to pay to study there, and we forget that we also have to live there. And there are going to be so many associated costs with where we choose to live, how we choose to live, and how many people we choose to live with. So let's get started with this video. Now, first things first, living expenses really depend on the type of accommodation that you opt for. And from personal experience, I can tell you that living expenses are the second highest fixed expense head. Now, what does that mean? So there are two types of expenses that you will encounter while you're studying abroad. One is a fixed expense type, which will just be there every single month and every single year that you're studying abroad. And the second is a variable expense type, which will change depending on your wants, depending on how much you choose to spend. And therefore, it's variable. It can be flexible and change on a daily or monthly basis. But rent or accommodation ends up being a fixed expense head, and the place that you choose to stay in will require you to sign some sort of contract for a few months, so you're bound to them, and that's why you need to make the decision very, very carefully. So now that we know that we have this fixed and variable expense head, let's understand how rent features in this fixed expense head. Now, there's so many different kinds of accommodation. You can have a single room all to yourself with a bathroom, or you can have a single room all to yourself with a shared bathroom and a community style living. Or you can opt for a dormitory where a lot of people live in the same room and then they share a bathroom. Or you can opt for a studio or a flat system where you're living in a building with other people and maybe you're sharing a common kitchen space or a common shared living space. So while choosing your accommodation, you also need to think about the kind of person that you are. Now, for me personally, I like spending a lot of time by myself, so a single room made sense. But if you're the kind of person that enjoys meeting new people, you want to be out and about, maybe you thrive off of the energy of other people, then you might want to consider maybe a shared living space or a common area in some way so that you're constantly meeting new people. And what I would also suggest is, of course, compare the prices and the cost of living. So here's where lists become the most handy thing to have with you. I used to make a bunch of big lists and have multiple columns within them. I would write down maybe say the top 5 or top 10 accommodations that I was looking at. And then next to it, I would literally write whether, what kind of options they had. Did they have like a common garden? Did they have any kind of membership benefits? Did they have a fitness center? I just wrote down everything I could possibly find out about these different accommodations. And then once I had that big list in front of me, it became so much easier to make my decision. So that's a little bit about your accommodation. But there's of course some other things that you need to factor in as well. Apart from your living expenses, there will just be some very basic expenditure such as your travel expenses. When you live abroad, you're going to end up using a lot of public transport, whether that be buses, tubes, trains, or taxis. And maybe in India, you're used to having your own car, but when you go abroad, it's going to be public transport and you have to get a little bit used to that. You also have to start deciding what is the most economical one for you so that you don't overspend on travel every day. Personally, while I lived in London, it was so important for me to just walk everywhere because taking a taxi costs a lot of pounds and I did not want to spend that kind of money on it. And a bonus tip here would be try and find an accommodation that is very close to your university. I've seen so many people make this mistake of finding an accommodation that's cheaper but far away from university, and then you end up spending the same amount traveling every day, so in the end it becomes the same thing. Now let's move to the next element. So apart from travel to college, you're also going to travel within the city. You're living abroad, you're of course going to want to explore and take your friends to different places. So keep that in mind as well, that's probably going to be a variable cost. The places that you go to, the amount of times that you go outside is all going to add up. So keep those living costs in mind as well. Apart from that, I would say that food ends up being quite a big expense head. We don't realize it, but either you need to find a consistent place, like say a mess, or a place that gives you lunch, dinner and breakfast every day, or you need to just find out a bunch of places that you can rely on, that you can get your food from, and then have those expenses sorted out as well. So try and find convenient places for you to spend your money wisely, where you get nutritious food and something that consistently is there for you to take from. So that's a little bit about food. Now, here's the next thing I would say. You're probably listening to all these expense heads and wondering, wow, this is going to add up quite a bit. And when you're planning, you might feel like it does add up, but here's what I would suggest. While you're thinking about how you're going to save up for your living expenses, maybe you should check out ways in which you can save and invest better. And here's where I'd like to mention the EduFund app, which really helps you to invest and save your money so that you can plan better for the future when you're studying abroad. And I would highly recommend that you go through this app with your parents so you can make the right investment well in advance. So when time comes to go to college, you've got all of this covered and you don't have to worry about shelling out more money for living expenses. So please remember to account for your tuition fee as well as the living expenses and what kind of city you're going into. I would also suggest that maybe you can look out for scholarships or bursaries which are specifically for living expenses. Sometimes your university might be giving them, or sometimes an accommodation might be offering it to you already. The accommodation I lived in, which was in London, was called the William Goodenough College, and it was such a beautiful place. It was created for international students. It was like a community. We all came together and we all had to apply to get in there. So it was a merit-based application process, and because of that, you also were able to get a scholarship if you wanted one to live there. So I would suggest try and find places like that where you get more scholarships, you get an opportunity to network with an international cohort of people, and just overall you get to make the most of your time living abroad. With that, if you have any questions at all about what you can do, how you can save up more money, and how you can make the most of your studying abroad, please write to us and we'd love to be able to help you. I hope this video was informative and gave you some tips and some guidelines on how you can make the most of your living expenses and cost of living abroad. I wish you all the best, and I hope that your application is a success and you get to live in the city of your dreams, because trust me, it's one of the best experiences that you're going to have.